Hi, everyone. It's so great to be back with you for another episode of Writer's Chat. My name is Johnny Alexander. I'm joined by my co-hosts, Melissa Stroh and Brandy Bro, and also by two very, very special guests that I am just so excited to have with us today to talk about writing a series and their different perspectives on how to do that. We have Sara Davison and Brenda Anderson with us. Sara and Brenda and I are all part of the Mosaic Collection, a group of international authors who do indie publishing and put out amazing stories and anthologies, two anthologies every year of short stories. And they have just, I mean, it's just been great to be able to work with these ladies and the other women in our group as we help market each other's books and brainstorm together and put these anthologies together. And one of our anthologies won the SALA Award last year at the Blue Ridge Mountain Christian Writers Conference. And I think the other one came in second, right?
It did.
So yeah, so we're really getting out there. So let me introduce both Brenda and Sara to you. Brenda S. Anderson writes authentic and gritty, life-affirming fiction that shows God at work in people's messy lives. She enjoys live sports and theater, walking along the shores of Lake Superior and sharing hot cocoa with friends and family. She lives near Minneapolis with her newly retired husband and their mischievous ginger kitties, Mauer and Morneau. Get to know Brenda better at brendaandersonbooks.com. Sara Davison is the author of numerous romantic suspense series and one standalone novel, The Watcher. She lives in Ontario with her husband, Michael. Like every good Canadian, Sara loves coffee, hockey. Oh my gosh, is this poutine? Sara, you'll have to.
Yeah, well done, well done.
Okay. And apologizing for no particular reason. Get to know Sara better and subscribe to her short monthly newsletter at www.ontheedgesuspense.com. And I will say that I have read books by both of these women, and they are terrific authors and just write great books, great stories. They're just wonderful. So very excited to have you ladies with us today.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Johnny. I'm happy to be here.
Yes. Okay, so I guess now we're going to go ahead and get started with Sara's presentation, correct?
Yeah, so I just wanted to say hi to everybody and thank you for having me. I pre-recorded my presentation because I'm not really a public speaker, but I am looking forward to talking to you after. So I hope you enjoy it.
Yay.
I think
All
we
right.
will.
No, I know we will. If you haven't read Sara's, as Melissa's getting things ready, I'll just say as if you haven't read Sara's um Two Sparrows for a Penny series, oh my gosh. Amazing. Amazing. I highly recommend that series. It is just wonderful.
Well, all right. Well, here we go.
Hi there. Thanks for having me today. I have to admit, I was a little apprehensive when I was asked to do a presentation on writing series because I've always said that I didn't think I could describe my process to anyone because I'm not even really sure how I do things myself. I am a pantser. I do not meticulously plot anything out. And I do like when I start to have an idea of where the book or the series is going to start and where it's going to end. But everything that happens in between is very fluid. Even to, as you'll see in this presentation, the number of books in a series changing more or less as I'm working through a series. So what I'm really going to do today is not tell you how to do something. I'm just going to share with you how I have done things, things I've learned through trial and error, things that have worked and maybe haven't worked. And hopefully you'll just be able to glean a little something from that to help you in your writing. A bit about me. I'm a Canadian. I live in Niagara Falls area of Ontario. Married to Michael for almost 30 years. We've moved a lot, mostly because of his work, but now he's retired, so I'm hoping we're actually going to be here for a number of years. We have 3 kids in their 20s and a cat and a dog. Um, And how I got started on this kind of crazy writing journey, as I mentioned, we moved a lot as I was a kid. And the first thing I would always do and still do when I moved to a new town was find the local library. And I remember being in our little library when I was a kid, and it was in this old house with creaky wooden floors. And I remember walking between two shelves of books and kind of running my fingers along the spine and thinking, all these people have written a book. It can be done. I can do this. And a very long journey, an ongoing journey later, probably 15 years now that I've been seriously writing. I have done it, but I'm continuing to learn, and it's not easy, but it's still a lot of fun, and I hope it will continue to be. I have 15 books out, including 6 finished or in process series. My first book came out in 2011, and I had thought that this would be a 2-book series. But by the time it actually won a publishing contest and was published, and I started thinking about the second book, I thought, you know what, the first one is really finished. When I was writing the second one, I thought it felt very forced and it just wasn't working. So that's my only book so far that's in a desk drawer and likely will never see the light of day. And The Watcher became a standalone. But that was fine, except that I realized then that I had nothing to build on at that point, no more stories to tell. And so I began thinking about the value of writing series. So my takeaway from that is just that standalones can be amazing, of course, but they're called standalones for a reason because they don't lead you or the readers anywhere else. And so I started thinking about the series that I had read that had had a big impact on me. And when I was a teen, I think I read the Love Comes Softly series, and that really impacted me. I loved it. I realized the power of Christian fiction and of story. And I remember not being able to wait as I was finishing one book to get into the next one. I just loved it. And so that really started me thinking about series. And then as I was a bit older, I read the D. Henderson O'Malley series, which, if you haven't read it, is a really, really popular, probably the most popular Christian fiction romantic suspense series for sure. And what Dee did with that series was she had, in each book features a chosen family member. So these were kids that were in the foster system and kind of broken and angry and hurting, and they found each other and they decided that they would become a family. And that whole idea of chosen family really impacted me. And you'll find if you read any of my books that that comes up quite often because I really loved the idea of just being able to decide if your biological family had rejected you or you'd lost them for some reason, that you could decide to form a family that could be as powerful or even more powerful sometimes. So I just loved that series, and it's had a lot of impact on readers and writers. Later read, Danny Petrie and other romantic suspense series, and again, it was just really amazing to get so invested in the characters and not be able to wait to read the next book. So the takeaway is a well done series with compelling storylines that readers love can have, and strong characters that readers love can have a lasting impact on readers and writers. So I wrote my first traditionally published series and decided to go easy on myself and write an end time series. I love the idea of Dee Henderson's foster kids, that being the unifying element among the stories. That's a great way to do it, and it's very popular. There's often a series that is siblings or co-workers, and it makes things kind of easy for the author. I did not do that with this series. In fact, my main female and male characters are bookstore owner Marin O'Reilly and Captain Jesse Christensen of the Canadian Armed Forces. And all 3 books feature them as the main characters. So it's their story, their love story, that begins with book 1 and ends with book 3. And it worked for this series, thankfully, but it is a challenge because you really have to have a lot of conflict, a lot of barriers. They have to go through really hard things, and you have to have great um, subplots. You have to have really strong minor characters, and I introduced different characters, minor characters into each book because you've got to work very hard to maintain readers' attention for one couple over 3 books. As I said, it did work in this book, in this series. It won some awards and got some really good feedback, but it's something that you want to approach with caution. But the takeaway is not to be afraid to try new and different unifiers and storyline arcs, and ultimately to do whatever served the story best, which is why I did that. That was the best way to serve this story. I did have some issues. I was with a very small publishing company in the States. And I just want to talk about series covers for a minute because our first cover that came out for book 1 was not great. So what was weak about this cover was that the image was not one that my target market, which is the American Christian fiction market, would recognize. It's actually the Canadian Parliament buildings and the Centennial Flame in front of them. So it wasn't an image they would recognize. The font is completely wrong for romantic suspense. And overall, it's just not a compelling cover, amateurish. It doesn't give a sense of what the story's about or the genre. So the takeaway there is that creating covers that draw readers to the book and set reasonable expectations for genre, story, time period, etc., is critical, which this cover did not do. We did do more versions of this cover. So when I went with a second publishing company, we did this one, which was definitely an improvement. We introduced a human element. The font is much better. It was just a more compelling cover. Now this series is being re-released again, and books 1 and 2 came out last year, and this was the new cover for book 1, which is the best of all 3 because it really captured the not just the romantic suspense, but the speculative, futuristic elements in the story. And it put a full face on, which not all readers or writers like, but it is compelling. And the whole overall effect was just that it was much more professional. But if you thought book 1's cover was bad, book 2's cover was very problematic. The biggest issue was that we put a dragon on the cover and not a very compelling dragon. And if you're going to put a dragon on the cover of a book and in the title, and it's not a fantasy book, then that's a problem. So again, I was not giving readers an accurate expectation of what the story would be. And readers can put up with a lot, but they do want to know what they're getting. And if you mislead them or don't give them what they're looking for, or they don't know what to look for, then you will hear about it in the reviews. We realized early on that this was not the right cover for this genre, and so we, with the same company, put out a second one, and it was not much better. In fact, this area here, which should be the focal point, is kind of a black hole. So neither of those are really strong. But in my defense, if I have one, it's that I was a new writer. I didn't know what to ask for, and I didn't even really know that I could ask. And so once I did start to speak up, we were able to incorporate more of what I had in mind. The next publishing company put out this one, and again, they introduced that human element, which brought it to life, and better font. And then last year it came out with this final cover, which again not only captures the genre and the story and the characters better, but it matched up very well with the first cover, which of course is extremely important for a series. They need to look just at a glance like a series. Now, you can go too far the other way. I've seen series where the covers are so similar that you really have to look closely to tell that they're different books, and that's confusing for readers. But they should definitely look like a series side by side. Book 3, this was the original cover. We moved to this one, which was certainly better. I love bold, bright colors, and so that one really appealed to me. Once again, though, it doesn't really give a lot of the genre particularly, and so that's what will happen with book 3, which has not yet been designed. It's going to be revealed in June. But the takeaway of all this is that book covers are critical. I mean, like it or not, we do judge books by their covers. And so you cannot be afraid as the author to speak up and let your cover designer know what you want, and preferably know what works for particular genres, have some idea of that so that you can request that and make sure that you get the right covers for the series, because it can really make or break a book or a series. Brief comment on naming the series. Another mistake I made with that first series was we called it the Seven Trilogy. And that was a reference to the seven churches in Revelation or the end times, but that was too vague, and most people missed that. And in fact, I was asked repeatedly when the other four books are going to come out, because even though it was called a trilogy, I had set the expectation by putting the word seven in the title of the series that there would be seven books, which was a mistake on my part as well. So by the time the series came out last year, we had changed the name to the Day Draws Near series, which still gives an idea of the genre and the story, but is not as misleading as the original title. Something else I really recommend with series titles and book titles is putting an object or a visual in the title. So for example, I have a series called the Rose Tattoo Trilogy, and we've really been able to use a lot of roses in marketing and advertising, which gives not only interest, but consistency throughout your marketing. I also have a series called Two Sparrows for a Penny, and we've been able to use a lot of sparrows. The books in that series, one has star in the title, one has flowers, and another one has bird. And so we've been able to use those visual objects as well. And it's fun to be able to find the right images to use. And it gives you, as I said, some consistency and helps readers, again, to know what series that you're talking about. So I highly recommend doing that. But basically, just make sure that your series title conveys the genre, the time period, and a little bit of what the story is about. With my second traditionally published series, this was, in my mind, absolutely a two-book series. I had a pretty good idea of what these two stories were going to be about. The problem was, as I came to the end of writing book two, I introduced a character, Michaela. And by the time I finished the book, I thought, well, what's Michaela's story? And I also had a married couple in this book as minor characters, and their marriage was heading into troubled waters. And so I wanted to explore that as well. And because I had called it a series and not a trilogy or a duology, I was able to expand that series into a third book. But then I decided that Michaela needed a love interest, and Jax Rodriguez, my Puerto Rican Canadian private investigator, came swooping in, and he kind of stole the book, which he wasn't supposed to, but he did. And in one scene, it's mentioned that Jax became a private investigator specializing in missing persons because his brother had been missing for 20 years and he'd been searching for him. And so as we finished Driven, I started to wonder about this brother and where Diego was, if he was alive, and if Jax would ever be able to find him. And so I had to write book 4, Forged, which took Jax to Caracas, Venezuela, and then fleeing a drug lord through the El Yunque rainforest in Puerto Rico, which was a lot of fun. So these two books were never supposed to exist, really, but they've done very well. Driven won the Carroll Award, and Forged was a Christie Award finalist. And I say that not to brag, but just to encourage you to, even if you're a meticulous plotter, keep the door open to add more to your series, because sometimes that is just where the story and the characters will lead you, and it's really important to go where they're taking you. So then I was invited to join the Mosaic Collection, which is an amazing group of indie authors. And at first I kind of hesitated, even though writing independently had crossed my mind. It was still kind of daunting. I had no idea what would be involved. But thankfully I got over myself and I did join them, and it really has been the greatest thing I've done for my writing career. There's potential pitfalls with indie writing, of course, because you don't have that team making decisions. You're making decisions and you can make mistakes probably a little easier. But the great thing about going with a group like Mosaic is you kind of get the best of both worlds. So still put out all our books independently and have control over every aspect, but we also have that support team around us, encouraging us and giving each other advice and then promoting and marketing our books as they come out. And so it's really the best of both worlds. But as I mentioned, you can make mistakes. And one thing I've done, I think, is again with the covers. So these were the covers of the first two books of the Rose Tattoo trilogy. On their own, they're okay, and they actually really capture the story in that book. But as you can see, they do not look like that they're part of the same series, which they are supposed to be. But the great thing about being an indie author is you can make changes. And so this year I'm going to be re-releasing these books with some updated content and brand new covers. And these covers, we've leaned into the rose theme, as you can see. We've used the kind of font and style that suggests romantic suspense, but we've also kind of introduced an element to reflect the fact that my stories often have a bit of women's fiction feel or romance, and so these covers show that a little bit more as well. So, that's a pitfall, but the great thing is that you can correct mistakes and make changes at any point. And the great things about indie writing are that you have control over those changes and every aspect. So you can control sales and deals, timing of releases, length of series, and control over all content. With a caveat here, because sometimes when I'm writing, I'll get almost giddy about the fact that I can put anything into these stories and no one can stop me. However, I do need to always keep in mind my target market. I write for the Christian market, and that means that I do not put in swearing or anything explicit or gratuitous, because I will hear about it from my readers. I don't want to do that anyway, but I do have to keep my readers in mind, and I don't want to alienate them. And again, I want to meet the expectations that they have both for my stories and for Christian fiction in general. So the takeaway is that the biggest perk of indie publishing is maintaining control over every aspect of your book and series, which can be kind of scary, but it's also really great. However, another issue that can come up is that I was not finished, and I'm still not finished, my first indie series. I still have 2 books written, and I'm waiting to write the third, which I'm hoping will come out this fall. But in the meantime, another series kind of forced itself into my head and would not wait its turn. And so I set the Rose Tattoo trilogy aside, and I wrote the Two Sparrows for a Penny series. Something that I did a little differently with this series, I think it's the only one I've done this with, is I've essentially wrapped it up. And as far as my readers are concerned, it's finished. However, I left enough storylines loose, open, that I can I can write a 4th book. I have another 4th story in mind and a title, and I've written some of it. So at some point down the road, I will add another book to this series, but I have wrapped it up enough that there isn't any pressure to do that immediately, which is good. So sometimes you just need to hit pause on a series to write the story that's demanding to be told. And for me, that's worked really well for me, and I really believe that it allows me to write stories that are stronger and better because they're the ones that are just in my mind and need to come out. And it's something that wouldn't be allowed in traditional publishing, but it is one of the things that is great about the indie, because I can do that. However, I kind of compounded the problem when another book, the first of a 3rd series, came into my head. And again, I just felt compelled to write it and put it out. And so I did that last year. And so that, sometimes that freedom of indie publishing can cause issues. But learning to embrace that freedom, to go with your gut and write the story that just needs to be written, is better. And you can just embrace that and deal with those issues as they come along. And again, it's just one of the joys of indie. And if you have a good relationship with your readers, and I spend time in my Facebook group with them and interact with them whenever possible, so that I do have a good relationship with them, and so they haven't given me too hard a time about that, thankfully. Something something else I do is I write stories and novellas for anthologies. So the Mosaic Collection puts out 2 anthologies a year, one in the spring and one at Christmas or winter. And we're about to put out our 12th one this spring, and I've had a story or novella in each one. And every one of those stories is connected to my series. So they're a prequel, or they tell the story of minor characters. And that's been a lot of fun for me to be able to explore and allow those lesser characters to tell their story and feature in their own stories. And readers have really enjoyed that as well. And now that we've put out so many, I have enough to put in a collection of my own. And so this spring, I'll be releasing this book, This Little Nowhere Nothing Town, which in this book and both the novels will have a recommended order of reading of stories and books so that readers can go back and forth between those stories and between the novels. They won't have to. The stories can stand on their own. The novels can stand on their own. But if they do follow that order of reading, they will get what I call the complete Rose Tattoo Trilogy experience. So that's a lot of fun. It's fun for me and it's fun for readers. Because readers love stories or other supplemental material that go with a series, and it just allows you to extend the reach of that series a bit and just make it a little bit richer. Another thing I've done, particularly with my later series, is I've added diversity, diverse characters in. My books are set in Canada, so not having that is just really not authentic. And adding them in has really added depth and interest to my stories. I've loved it personally. I've used some different language in my book here and there. I've put in some traditions, put in some food, and it's been a lot of fun. Of course, there are potential concerns when you're writing characters that have a different ethnic background than you. So I deal with those in 2 ways. First, all my characters are born and raised in Canada, so we have that in common. And secondly, I always try to have a cultural sensitivity reader go through them just to make sure I'm portraying that culture authentically and respectfully and accurately and not using stereotypes. But the takeaway is that including diverse characters adds interest and depth to stories. I've also started adding in characters with different abilities. So I have a novella with a blind character, and I'm working on a new series that will come out. The first book will come out in March of 2026. And it's a series with 5 brothers on a ranch in Manitoba, and the oldest brother is deaf, and the youngest brother is on the spectrum. So that's also been very interesting to do the research and put myself in those shoes, and it's been a lot of fun for me to write. Just as a side note, I had a friend who's in a wheelchair who, when I was telling him about doing this, he said, "Can I just ask you to not try and fix those characters?" And that really struck me because I actually had been thinking of maybe having some kind of surgery for my deaf brother Adam. And then as I talked to him, I realized that Adam wasn't broken. That was who he was. He embraced that. It had made him the kind of person that he was. It was his community. And so that really just flipped my thinking on that. So just something to keep in mind if you're going to add characters with disabilities or different abilities. Something that makes the series even more fun is to put in some Easter eggs. And once you have more than one series, you can do this. And just quickly, some ways that I've done that with my Jax Rodriguez, my private investigator, and he opens a PI firm in Toronto with Daniel Gray, another character of mine who was a police detective. And that's been really great. I've been able to bring them into a lot of books because when you write romantic suspense, it's really great to have a PI firm on retainer that you can draw from when you need that. If somebody needs advice or you just need those resources. Another thing I've done is a lot of my stories are set in a cafe in a little town. And so I've had other characters that have come to that cafe, but in a different series. The pitfall there can be that if you don't weave that in really carefully and organically, that readers who haven't read those other stories can wonder where these characters or this place is suddenly coming from. So you really have to work it carefully into the story. But the really great thing is that your loyal readers who read everything that you write, they spot those things and they love it, and it feels like a kind of a club or a secret language. And so Once you can do that, start crossing over characters and places, that's really will entertain and reward your loyal readers, especially. So why do readers crave series? Not all do, to be honest. I've heard people say they're really looking for standalones, but I think that's a minority opinion. The majority of readers are really looking for a series, and I believe that's because when you have characters that are either are highlighted in a book or that just recur in books, it really allows readers to be able to develop a strong relationship with them and get to know them, develop an emotional connection with them so that they care what they're going through and that they're emotionally involved and invested. And it's those emotions and feelings that your books draw out of readers that's what sticks with them when they close the book. They may not remember all the details of the story, but they will remember characters and they'll remember how they felt about what the characters went through. So if you have like a series that's got a really strong storylines and some great minor characters, strong dialogue, which is crucial, humor, and if you write for the Christian market, especially like I do, if you leave readers with a sense of hope, even if you don't tie up all the loose ends, even if it's not a clear happily ever after ending, if they're left with hope, then those are the kinds of series that they will remember and that they'll want to read again and again and that they'll tell everybody they know about. And that's, of course, always what you want. So, what I may have done right in my career so far, or pardon me, what I might have done wrong, I've shared with you most of. It's mostly been covers, and the other thing that I've never been able to do enough of is spend an appropriate amount of time or money on marketing. But I am working on improving both of those areas of for my books and my series. What I may have done right, I think the biggest thing I've done right is surround myself with community. The Christian writing community is just a beautiful, supportive, encouraging body that I'm grateful every day to be part of. And then I'm also thankful for the groups underneath that umbrella, like the Mosaic Collection and other writers groups that I'm blessed to be part of. You want to have people in your community that are farther along the journey than you are, that can show you the way and teach you. And you want people that are farther behind that you can share your hard-earned knowledge with and encourage. And you want people that are at the same level so that you can brainstorm and support each other. So that's probably the biggest thing I've done right. And the other thing I have done and will always hopefully continue to do is always try and get better and better and more excellent and hone my craft. Every book I put out, I want it to be better than the one before. And I'm always open to feedback and just trying to get better and better. And that's really the best thing that you can do, whether you're writing a book or a series, is to put it out, do the most excellent job that you can do. And that's what's going to draw readers. So thank you so much. I really enjoyed speaking with you. I'd love to answer any questions that you might have either today or feel free to connect with me at any time. My tagline is On the Edge Suspense. So that's also my website, ontheedgesuspense.com. Feel free to contact me there anytime. Track me down on Facebook, Sara Davison, or author Sara Davison, and I'd love to connect further. So thank you very much.
Great information.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry about the sound. I hope everybody could hear it. Okay.
Well, do we have some questions from the group that would like to pose to Sara? I was unable to see the chat while sharing, so have to
I haven't
scroll
seen
through.
any questions, but if I missed any, just holler in the chat.
Or feel free to pop on screen and pose a question or on audio.
Yep.
There was some really good comments and feedback, and particularly talking about characters with different abilities or disabilities. And yeah, I think it's really important to remember what some people have said, that that's who they are. It can be traumatic to try and change them. And that there's a lot of diversity there too, of course, right? That everybody's different.
Mm-hmm. David asked, "Oh, what is your favorite Easter egg from your books?"
Well, I mean, I always love bringing Jax in whenever possible. So he's shown up several times in stories and books. I think my favorite, though, actually is his PI partner, Daniel Gray. He's a cop in a different series in the Two Sparrows for a Penny series. I have a young cop who is also on the Toronto PD. And I thought, actually, they might have known each other, and maybe Daniel could have even been a mentor for him because he would have been older. And so I have Lakin from one series go to the PI firm and visit Daniel and get some really good advice from him. And that was fun to do that.
So, and I want to throw in something there too. When you're talking Easter eggs, doesn't I've done that a lot with my books, but I've also thrown in an Easter egg from a fellow author's book.
Mhm. Yep.
And that was fun. It was in one of our anthology stories, and I said, "Well, this guy fits into this world, so I'm just going to have him show up to this meeting." And so that was rather fun.
That's fun. Yep.
Another question that came up was, where are some good places to submit the side stories?
Yeah, that's a really good question. To be honest with you, it's been easy for me because I've just put them in the anthologies with the Mosaic collection. And then last Christmas, I actually joined together with three other authors and we put together our own anthology. So I've never really submitted them to an outside source. There's the writer's guide, market guides, which are great. And there'd be a whole section on where to submit stories if you were going to do that. But if you are thinking about indie writing or you're doing it, get some friends together and put one together. It's not that hard to do. So, Brenda, have you submitted stories anywhere else?
Well, not since Mosaic. So yeah, I basically just what you said as an indie author, if you have side stories, that's just an easy way to put it out there. Or even if you are a traditional published author and you want to, have published work of your side stories, who says you can't do an indie book on that?
So someone asked me if the perk of indie writing is having control over everything, is the downside being responsible for everything? And that's exactly right. It's actually quite terrifying. And every time I put out a book, it's terrifying. I wouldn't do it. I don't think I ever probably would have put out an indie book if I hadn't joined the Mosaic collection. And we give each other advice, and some of us are really knowledgeable in one area and some in another. And so we draw on that. So it is a team effort, which is really helpful. I would encourage you, if you are on your own and not in a group like that, um, still put a good team around you. As somebody mentioned, editing is crucial. Get it edited really, really well, and get a good cover designer and a good, formatter. Put a good team around you so that you don't. But still, every time on release day, I'll wake up about 3 in the morning, grab my Kindle, make sure the ebook showed up, run through it really quickly, make sure it looks okay. It's terrifying until I do this. I've coined a term, excitifying, because it is equally exciting and terrifying to put out a book when you're doing it on your own. But it's really for me, the control part and it outweighs that. But yeah, it's something you do have to know. It's scary.
I like that. I think we're gonna have to keep
Mhm.
that term in mind. That's a good one.
Mhm.
More positive slant than fixating on the terrifying, to know that
Yeah,
there's that good thing to look forward
almost
to.
equal, but it is exciting.
Well, I suppose we'll transition to you, Brenda, now, and you can share your perspective on series. We're anxious to hear your side of it too. Thank you, Sarah, for yours.
Thank you, Sarah.
Mhm.
So I don't know that I have that much different to say, but maybe just through it from a different perspective. Like Sarah, um, I'm not I've done public speaking, but it definitely isn't my in my skills, or yeah, it's not at the top of my skill set. So um, and I'm a very organized person, but when it comes to books, writing books and series, I'm a complete pantser. So that's you keep that in the back of your mind as I'm talking here, because I'm going to tell you how not to write a series because I've written 4 series and not a single one of them have followed any kind of rules that you would expect. So, um, I guess the first thing you do as when if you want to write a series is you don't want to be a pantser. This is my first the first book I ever wrote. It ended up my first draft. It ended up being really 2 stories in one. So right away I had 2 books in this series, and then when I would talk to agents and editors at conferences, I kept hearing, well, women don't. I had a male protagonist. See, that's another no-no. In basically women's fiction, family drama type writing. So I decided, well, about my hero's sister. So then, okay, now I've got 3 books in the series, but then I knew that the way I ended the actual second book in the series, I knew it needed something else. So there's my 4th book. So again, nothing planned. It just sort of as I wrote, I'm like, okay, this has to happen, and this has to happen, this has to happen. But once it all came together, it actually there is a story arc that it's someone called it a family saga, and I guess that's a good way to describe it. But it all happens to flow together somehow. So um, maybe don't be a series pantser, but can work out. Um, so, and then I went to write my second series that I wrote. Um, Again, I had no plans to write a series. And so I wrote the first book. And then the way it ended, there was a character. I thought, oh gosh, he really needs his story. Excuse me. Um, so then I wrote his story for the second book. And then the third book came about sort of a weird way. Um, my daughter and I were up north by Lake Superior, and there's this cute little candy store up there. And we walked in, and behind the counter, you sort of expect someone matronly working at a candy store. And there was this young lumberjack type of guy working there. And we both walked out saying, okay, that wasn't what we expected. So, anyway, I had to write a story about how does a guy like that end up working in a candy store. So I'm thinking, okay, how can I tie that into the first 2 books in the series? So then I took a character from book 2 and so I created book 3. Again, no plans, it just threw it together. But again, it all worked out. So um, let's see, the second rule I have for how not to write a series is don't choose a central idea. Most series will uh, center around like a family. Sara talked about the O'Malleys, and that's one that I immediately thought of, or a group of friends, or maybe Main Street, a career. I think about Stephen James, his Patrick Bowers series that follows this FBI agent, and so you've got his series has that commonality. And then that series, it all follows a chess game. So he's got Patrick Bowers and a chess game throughout this series. Stephen James is also a pantser, just for information, added information. So anyway, it helps. It helps if you have a central idea from the beginning. And because you do want to have an arc throughout the whole series that sort of draws it all together. Let's see. Okay. Um, and Sara talked about titles. Um, when you're looking at titles, you should, I like how Sara's titles, you can see they all follow a formula again. And that creates a brand in itself is a title. So I know with my first series, I would title them differently now if I were doing it again. They each have 3 words, but that's the only commonality between the series titles. But I'm not going to change them now. They've done well, so I won't change them. But then I learned in my second series, they all have, like, I got risking love, capturing beauty, planting hope. So you can, just tell by the sound that they go together. And then the series title is Where the Heart Is. And Sara brought up, how it's a good idea to have that, an image or whatever in the series. And I hadn't thought about that before, but that, do I have that? But that's a good idea. So even with my Where the Heart Is series, my designer at that time, he created this special heart that I used in all the books, like for scene breaks and everything. So, and that was used throughout each of the books in the series. So that's another small way to draw a series together. Let's see. And then another don't do is don't choose a name that won't draw all the books together. So my first series is just Coming Home series. And it sounds, after listening to series, I'm like, that's really a boring series. But it really is. Each book is about the characters coming home. So it is a good descriptor for that, but just something to think about. Milla Holt, she writes for the Mosaic Collection, and she writes, I say, romance with strong elements of women's fiction. She has a new series, and the series name is Rhapsody of Grace, and it so perfectly fits her books. Each of the books, it's following a musician through each of the stories, and it just ties it in so perfectly. And if you look at her covers too, they are definitely branded. You can look at each cover and say, okay, I know that this belongs to Milla's Rhapsody of Grace series. Let's see. What else? I'm trying not to repeat things. Oh, this was an important thing. One thing I did not do on my first series, or basically with most of my series, because I hadn't planned to write a series, I did not keep a character Bible. So it's very important, if you're going to write a series, to have a Bible, whether it be in a notebook or a spreadsheet or whatever works for you, of characteristics for, let me just read some of these things. You can look at their physical description. You definitely want to get that right. What is their style, personality traits, name spelling. That's important to get it right through each book. I did have a secondary character who was mentioned like a couple times in my first book in my second series. And then it was spelled Reese, Reese. And then the second book, once it was done, I realized it was spelled Reece. So I had to go do a search and replace and, make sure that the name was spelled right in all of that. So name spelling, let's see, backstory, moral and spiritual beliefs, keep track of that. And if a person's character changes from one book to next, there has to be a reason why that character has changed. You need to be consistent with habits, language, ideology, of their talents, hobbies, likes and dislikes, their insecurities. So if you keep track of that throughout each book, it will be a lot easier to write subsequent books, so you don't have to go back and reread and take all the notes from the first books to say, okay, now what color were his eyes, or what color, what are his expressions, what's a common phrase he might say. So yeah, keeping a character Bible will save you a lot of trouble. So if I were to write a series now, what would it look like? Well, I would create a plan. I'd choose a central idea, sort of a what if. I'd say, like I'll let you in. I actually have one brewing right now. I am sort of planning one just to see what it's like to plan a series. Um, so what if musical theater meets Christian fiction is is a vague what if, but it's I'm thinking about having three friends who met in musical theater in college, and that's what draws them together. And each of the books will be based off of a common or more of a well-known musical nowadays, like Guys and Dolls, The Music Man, Oklahoma. So, and sort of drawing from those stories to reflect on each of the books. So anyway, so I've got that. And then I'd create a backstory for those for the four, how they meet. And there's actually a fourth friend who died, and that's one thing that draws them together. So anyway, I won't give you all the details for that. But with that series, the covers will definitely be branded. The titles will follow the same formula, and I will keep a character Bible to draw all the books together and to make each subsequent book consistent. Um, so, a little disclaimer with all of this, despite doing all of my series the wrong way, um, they have all done well. Um, and Sara said this too. I think that the key really is to write a good, engaging story, and the readers will follow. And the nice thing is with the series is that readers do tend to follow. If they read book one, a lot of them are going to, if they liked it, well, they're going to pick up book two, and then they're going to pick up book three. So you will create a following with the series. So that's pretty much it. Any questions? Has anyone else written a series and can add some things that they wouldn't do?
I have written a historical fiction series, and I definitely agree with all of what you said for sure. Um, Gosh, I don't know. I mean, you both covered it all so well. That really does click on all the parts. I definitely agree on having that overarching idea and not just centering it around a theme. That's been definitely an essential thing in my series too. What do you use to keep your Bible? Catherine asks.
A spreadsheet. I just keep it all on a spreadsheet. I've got, their names. I've got their birth dates on. Their physical characteristics. What book I introduced them in. Their relationships, and so a whole bunch of stuff.
And I use both spreadsheets and Word documents. How about you, Sara? Do you?
No, I should. I use little, if anything at all, I'll use little post-it notes, which are all over my desk. Drives my organized husband crazy, but I'm not that organized. I should be, but I
I
really
use
rely
scripts.
on early readers telling me, "Oh, you've already used that name, or you spelled the name wrong," or my editor. So I'm thankful for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
That's
post-it notes are great.
Yeah, I'm a big fan.
Yep.
Leslie asked, when marketing, do you focus on marketing the first book, the series plot, or the brand?
Mm. I guess now that the series, once the series are written, then boy, I would um, mine are all pretty sequential. They can be read as standalones, but it's a deeper read if you read the first. So that's what I'll say. But I would probably just push people toward the first book so that they get the deeper. So I would market it that way. I'd be sure to say, yep, you can read each book separately, but to get a deeper meaning for it, start with book one or start with the prequel.
Yeah, for me, I mean, obviously, I put the books out one at a time and just market that book then.
Yeah.
Market the life out of it. But I'll do everything. Like I'll do those pictures with the tropes all around it, letting people know what to expect. Again, it's just about expectations, right? Making sure they know what it's going to be about. And I'll use the theme, whatever. I'll use anything at hand that I can do to keep things interesting and different, and but really let people know what the book is about and about the series. And my books tend to, not always, but really you do need to read them in order. They're rarely standalones. So yeah, so by the time all of them are out, I'm marketing the series as a whole.
That would be the
And
same for
Sara
me
does a
too.
really good job with her branding and the way she markets and the way like you said, you have those graphics with the tropes on there. Just that's such a smart idea. It's just an at a glance. It's like, oh, I know what this book is about, or I know what this series is about.
I do a good job with my graphics because I'm a master procrastinator, and when I should be writing, I'm making graphics. So that's why.
Oh, and just an aside too, Sara is also now designing covers, anthology covers for the Mosaic collection too. So she's got other talents as well.
Awesome. Well, do we have any other questions? Anyone want to pop on to ask or put it in the chat before we close for the day?
So far, we've covered everything that's in the chat.
I think so.
Yep.
Well, Sara and Brenda, thank you so much for sharing with today. This has been great. And yeah, as a fellow series writer and a little geeky on the topic, I really absorbed a lot of it. And I think that judging by all the comments we got, it definitely resonated with everyone else too.
Good, great. Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me back. It's always a joy.
For sure. So next week, for those who will be joining us live, we're going to have a Come Write With Us with Rachel Colby and teaching on how to become a noticer. So we hope you'll join us then. Thank you for joining us here live for those who are here, and for those of you who are watching the replay. We will invite you to join us every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern. Or, catch your time around the globe, as Johnny often says. And we thank you for sharing your time with us. Is there anything else that I may have missed, Brandy, that you want to add to that?
Yep. Be sure to check out our new YouTube channel, Writers Chat Show, which I believe we may be changing to just Writers Chat as the handle. So check us out, like and subscribe. You'll find all of our replays going forward on that particular channel. We still have all of our 300 plus video replays on Series Writers channel that you can access there as well. So lots of content there for you to check out. We'd love to have you here. You can always find us on Writers Chat members on Facebook if you want to join us live some Tuesday morning. We would love to have you. Other than that, everybody here, please stick around for the after party.
All right. We'll see you next time, everyone. Thanks.